Did you know that for over 4 decades the world stood on the brink of nuclear war, a silent battle between superpowers fought not just with weapons but with spies, propaganda and even space races? This was the Cold War, a clash of ideologies that reshaped the 20th century, and today we're breaking it all down. Welcome to Tides of Memory. My name is Tom, and today we're diving into one of history's most intense standoffs, the Cold War. By the end of this video, you'll understand how two nations armed with enough nukes to destroy the planet fought a war without ever firing a shot at each other. Picture this. It's 1945. World War II just ended, and while the Allies are celebrating victory, tensions are already brewing beneath the surface. The United States and Soviet Union, once reluctant allies against Hitler, now find themselves as rivals in a new kind of conflict. America championed democracy and free market capitalism, while the USSR pushed for communist revolution worldwide. This fundamental clash of ideologies would divide the world into two competing camps for the next 45 years. The first cracks appeared immediately after the war. At the Potsdam Conference in July 1945, Truman, Stalin and Churchill, later replaced by Attlee, tried to map out post-war Europe. But Stalin had other plans. While the West wanted democratic elections in liberated countries, the Soviets were busy installing communist puppet governments across Eastern Europe. By 1946, Winston Churchill famously declared that an Iron Curtain had descended across the continent. America responded with the Truman Doctrine in 1947, a policy of containment to stop communism's spread. This meant providing military and economic aid to countries resisting Soviet influence. The Marshall Plan poured billions into rebuilding Western Europe, not just out of generosity, but to create stable democracies that could resist communist appeals. Meanwhile, Stalin tightened his grip on Eastern Europe through rigged elections, purges, and the creation of Cominform to coordinate communist parties across Europe. Then came the first major crisis, the Berlin blockade of 1948–49. When the Western Allies introduced a new currency in their zones of Germany, Stalin cut off all land access to West Berlin, hoping to starve the city into submission. But the Allies responded with the Berlin Airlift, an incredible operation that flew in supplies around the clock. For 11 months, cargo planes landed every 90 seconds, delivering everything from coal to candy. Stalin eventually backed down, but the message was clear: neither side would yield easily. The arms race began in earnest when the Soviets detonated their first atomic bomb in 1949, years earlier than Americans expected. Now both sides had nukes, and the terrifying logic of mutually assured destruction took hold. By the 1950s, hydrogen bombs made the destruction even more unimaginable, single weapons capable of wiping out entire cities in an instant. Families built bomb shelters, schools held duck-and-cover drills, and the doomsday clock ticked closer to midnight. But the Cold War wasn't just about weapons, it was a battle for hearts and minds. When the USSR launched Sputnik in 1957, the first artificial satellite, America panicked. If the Soviets could put a satellite in space, could they launch nuclear missiles too? The space race was on, culminating with Kennedy's pledge to land a man on the moon. That iconic moment in 1969, when Neil Armstrong took his giant leap for mankind, wasn't just scientific achievement, it was Cold War propaganda at its finest. Perhaps the closest we came to nuclear war was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. When American spy planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida, Kennedy imposed a naval blockade. For 13 terrifying days, the world held its breath as Soviet ships approached the blockade line. Behind the scenes, frantic negotiations led to a secret deal. The Soviets would remove their missiles from Cuba if America removed its missiles from Turkey. The crisis passed, but both sides realized how easily things could spiral out of control. Most Cold War battles were fought indirectly through proxy wars. In Korea, Vietnam, Angola, Afghanistan and elsewhere, the superpowers backed opposing sides without directly confronting each other. These conflicts devastated local populations while allowing Washington and Moscow to compete without risking nuclear war. The Vietnam War especially became a quagmire for America, showing the limits of military power against determined nationalist movements. By the 1980s, the Soviet system was crumbling under its own weight. A stagnant economy, the costly war in Afghanistan, and growing dissent behind the Iron Curtain made change inevitable. When Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in 1985, his reforms of glasnost, openness and perestroika, restructuring, unintentionally accelerated the Soviet Union's collapse. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989, and by Christmas 1991, the Soviet Union itself dissolved. But the Cold War's legacy endures. Thousands of nuclear weapons remain on hair-trigger alert. NATO has expanded right up to Russia's borders, creating new tensions. The ideological battle between democracy and authoritarianism continues in new forms. Understanding this history helps us make sense of today's geopolitical tensions. So what do you think? Could the Cold War have turned hot? And could we see a new Cold War emerging today? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most dangerous confrontations, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly history explainers. Thanks for watching, and remember, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. See you next time on Tides of Memory, and as always, stay curious.